I think we need some form of a national labor council. Now, what that looks like, I think the fine-tooth details, if you will, need to be worked out. But my theory is that even though things are really bad right now, there are tons and tons of labor organizing going around the country, whether it's at Starbucks, whether it's at Amazon. We really need to see it happen at Walmart and a lot of other places in between. There are also people in local unions, bigger unions. I'm not talking about union bosses or delegates. I'm talking about labor organizers, union organizers, people like that. Where
beyond the ground people.
The working council that needs to come together. We had a gentleman on our show a few months ago that is one of the head of the Teamsters Union, and he made it very clear that they have progressive ideals regarding living wage, paid sick leave, universal health care, civil liberties. He has just as many Trump supporters as he does Bernie supporters in the union. Labor is the great equalizer, and right now, labor is what changes the economic infrastructure of the United States. No matter what issues the Republicans and Democrats are fighting on, they're not fighting on labor issues. They're fighting on wage issues that don't change the infrastructure of our economy and of our politics. But when labor comes to the forefront, they get together like nobody's business to screw workers. Evidence, of course, with what happened with the railroad workers. What do you guys think about potentially trying to formulate some type of a national labor council for whatever the goal may be? People will talk about a general strike, but as far as I'm concerned, it's about uniting labor against the oligarchy that is running our country. Your thoughts on that as we wind it down?
Sounds okay as long as it's not connected to electoral politics.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. The Democratic Party has to come to us.
I want clarification. Just tell me what you mean by not connected to labor, to electoral politics. That's all I know.
Well, the best example was the Sunrise Movement. The Sunrise Movement did an excellent job of electing non-corporate representatives, particularly Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush. They really made the difference in those particular elections. Yes, I know, Margaret, but the point is they ultimately decided to get in bed with Biden. And they did that with no guarantees whatsoever. They basically decided it's okay for us to become part of the Democratic, thinking we're going to have, the Elizabeth Warren, we're going to have a seat at the table. That doesn't do anything. If you are either making policy and enacting what is needed for labor, then there is no point. You basically become a free agent, almost like that third party that people desperately want. As you always say, we need a party of labor in this country. And we don't have it.
Everybody here says that.
So if we have the ability to basically sway elections based on what is and isn't being done, that to me, I think could be extremely powerful. And that's ultimately, it's almost like the Eugene Debs, if you will, movement that led to the policies of Teddy and especially of FDR. That only happened because a galvanized labor movement happened in this country over the course of several years. And then eventually things started to materialize, and it had nothing to do with electoral politics.
Yeah, no, actually, if I can, just for the record, because you're making the mistake that too many people on the left make. Okay. No FDR, you would not have had the labor movement you now have. Okay. Because the National Labor not the National Labor Relations Act alone, the National Industrial Recovery Act of 1933 already included in it a clause that workers had the right to organize. The capital found its way around it, and that's when they came back and Wagner got the National Labor Relations Act passed. But I do not believe for a moment that this, whatever council you're talking about, should in any way get into bed with politicians. But it is the case that we should not lose sight of the fact that without ultimately shaping legislation, we won't win.
I agree with that.
That's really important.
Yeah.
And just to kind of jump in there with a final thought, because I know we're coming up on time. And it's been great hanging out with y'all and airing some grievances on this most sacred of holidays, Festivus. One parenthetical, maybe we'd save it for another stream, but I was thinking of you guys because our like top performer on the Real News website over the past month is actually a podcast interview I did with Mike Preisner about Ron DeSantis's time in Guantanamo Bay.
Right.
And it's some really fucked up shit. So like,
Yeah.
I would recommend folks, it's fair warning, there's an interview with a Guantanamo detainee. So the details get pretty graphic, but it's important listening, especially for a guy who has managed to hide his military, past, I think, quite well. But we're talking about someone who wants to be president in 2 years. So we should know about this stuff. But in terms of labor, the historian Tony Gilpin had a great line this time last year, right? Because we're all rightly excited about the fact that unions, in terms of public favorability, right, are, more supported now than they've been in like my lifetime.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really good. Right. I think that is a sea change in the public's perception, not only of labor unions as such, but also like breaking down that distinction that we really tried to play hard into in the 90s and early aughts of like separating our lives and subjectivities as consumers and workers, right? Citizens and voters and workers, right? I think the more that the oligarchy has been like ripping us off, the more that the proletariat has expanded and working people's wages have been stagnant, cost of living is going up, we're working harder, we're working longer, while the fruits of that productivity are getting siphoned into the pockets of useless fucking billionaires like Elon Musk or Warren Buffett, right? That is the dialectic at work. And so the longer we go in that direction, the more those sorts of boxes that they try to put us in, like they did with the railroads, right? Oh, you as a consumer are about to have Christmas taken away from you because of these greedy workers who are going to go on strike. Less and less people bought into that shit than they had, I think, in the 90s and even in the 80s. Like, that's good. I think that's a really big, significant sea change. But what Tony Gilpin rightly pointed out last year, especially when we're talking about labor's relationship to electoral politics, is that labor does not need to be liked. Labor needs to be feared in that realm, right? And when I say labor, I mean all of us, right? Kind of building on what you were saying, Jen, about us being in the proletariat, or us being in what Rick Wolf said to me on an interview at The Real News, the order taking class, as opposed to the order giving class, right? I really like the way that he puts that, because, and if you're watching this stream, you are not in the latter. You are not in the order giving class, right? None of us are, right? So it just,
there could be a spy for them watching. That is possible,
right? Well, we had Bill Clinton. That's an exception, right? But like in that regard, we need an independent labor movement that puts the needs of working people at the forefront, right, of the ledger of society's priorities. These aren't things to be negotiated over. These aren't, quote unquote special interests for certain elected officials to juggle in some sort of, like Rube Goldberg, like political coalition. Like, no, these are non-negotiable necessities that working people are demanding, right? And like, they are going to put the fear of God into you, not just because they have a voting bloc that will vote with our class interests first, right? But because we are a powerful force to be reckoned with. That is the missing piece that I hope we carry, the motivation into 2023 to build out that part of this budding kind of revivifying like labor movement, right? That is why I preach so much to folks that this isn't something happening off screen. This isn't something happening in another state. This is happening where you are right now. Your neighbors, your coworkers, the coffee shop that you go into before you go to work, right? That sort of worker unrest is everywhere. And more people in different types of industries are starting to rise up for many of the same reasons. Now, the point that we need to kind of pick up on is we need to connect those, right? Because it actually doesn't happen as much as you would think. Like, just to give one example, and then I promise I'll shut up in a second. I had a live stream at the Real News Network last week that I was very proud of. I had a railroader on, Matt Parker. I fucking love that guy. engineer out of Reno. I had a striking worker at Case New or CNH Industrial in Iowa, Marcus Derby. We had someone from the University of California strike, someone from the New School strike, someone from one of the newspaper strikes, the one that was going on in Fort Worth, right? We're always told that like these segments of the working class have nothing in common with each other, that one side is the more true blue working class and the other isn't. And like it, even a lot of leftists like love making it seem as if like it's some big logical puzzle to figure out like how can we possibly build a working class coalition. I'm like, it's not that fucking hard. First, just talk to people and also get them in the same room and we can actually win this thing. Like I said, we had these workers from all over the country, different coal miners. They were Hayden and Braxton Wright were on that call as well from Warrior Met Coal. They were all just talking about how they could support each other, what we could learn from these different struggles, how we could show solidarity and keep these things going, right? And how viewers and listeners could get involved in that. Like that is not hard. We need to get out of our own heads and stop trying to kind of think about, like this three-dimensional chess and let the theory do too much work. I think we're all, well-versed in Marxism and other types of essential theory that give us the framework for understanding the world that we're in. But when it comes to acting concertedly and building power and building solidarity with our fellow workers, you don't need a whole lot of theory getting in the way of that. You just need a bleeding heart, 2 ears, and you need to not be an asshole. Just actually listen to each other, actually care about each other, actually want working people to have a better life. If you have those in your corner, I promise you, you'll be fine. And so I wholeheartedly endorse this idea of building in whatever form it takes, right? At least start building the infrastructure through which different segments of the labor movement and the labor movement to be can start coming in conversation with each other, start learning, start having conversations that are maybe better had amongst ourselves than online, in front of everybody, right? Like these are strategic questions that we have it within us to figure out. And I am heartened by the solidarity I've seen from average people across this country and beyond over the past year, whether it be supporting the railroads, whether it be raising the alarm about UPS drivers dying in their trucks because they don't have air conditioning, right? I mean, like whether it be people standing on these academic picket lines or calling out Starbucks and Howard Schultz for violating workers' rights. Like, I think that is really exciting. And what we need to carry into 2023, right, is just the understanding that if it builds into a party itself, great. That may not necessarily be like the kind of end result of the kind of working class, cross-industry, cross-state solidarity building mission that we're talking about here. But what I think we need to understand and why I find so much hope in the labor movement as such, right, is because everything we've been talking about, everything that throughout the past hour, right? This is the common theme, is that this is what happens when you live in a society where decision-making power is concentrated in the hands of a very select few, a small group of people who are, as Margaret said, working together by and large throughout most of the goddamn year, right? They make a show out of like being enemies when it's convenient for them, but by and large, there is the ruling class and its lackeys serving its interests, and then there's us, right? And we need to advocate for our own interests. And when working people take that fateful step, even just to tell their own manager, hey, you can't talk to me that way. I'm a human being, right? Or, hey, I'm a human being with a life and a sick kid at home. If I'm telling you like I need to go home, I need to go home, right? Like you don't get to determine, like the conditions of my humanity just because, you have manager on your goddamn name tag, right? Like doing that changes you. Not accepting and abiding that arbitrary authority changes you. It makes you more the kind of person to realize that you have it within your power to change your circumstances. And you can actually do that at a better, more effective and bigger level if you work with your fellow workers. And so what I find so hopeful about the labor movement is that if we win, If people through the struggle learn that they can actually change the world that they live in, they don't just have to accept whatever the ruling class gives us or whatever just happens to us by forces beyond our control. The more power we build, the more power we want. And I think that that is why it is so important for us to do whatever we can to make sure working people win, because that starts this kind of catalytic effect that we can be part of. When we can't predict how big that will grow, we saw with the George Floyd protests how big it can get when that many people are motivated and are talking to each other about the same issues. So I think we know what can happen, but we actually have to get in there and do the work, and we can't be relying on any political party to do it for us.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.